We're at Southeast Community College, Lincoln, Nebraska, and we're talking to Dave Grant, one of the instructors here. We're very interested in how they train drivers and what they feel about training in general, including those motor carriers in which the drivers ultimately end up and the further training they receive at those motor carriers. Most of those are called finisher programs. Let's see what Dave has to say about it. As we walked around your facility, we saw classrooms, we see the trucks, we're sitting in front of them. Out on your lot, there are trailers and everything else. So we know you do a lot of hands-on, behind-the-wheel training. You also do a lot of classroom training. What are you doing in the classroom? What are some of the topics that you're covering in the classroom?
The very first 5 days that we are here, we teach them about their CDL license and what is demanded of them and the requirements to retain that CDL license. We also have the things that's going to take that license away, such as crossing railroad tracks when the cross arms are flashing and so forth. We get them trained on that part, and we don't spend a whole lot of time, but we get them to the point where they know and understand what is required of them, and we go right directly into the control systems and vehicle systems. And this is designed so that they know what depth they need to have on a steering tire, what depth they need to have on a drive tire and trailer tires, the brakes.
How do they know that on the tread depth?
We have to show them. We have to show them that it's 230 seconds on all tires except the steering, and that's 430 seconds, and plus they have to do this for DMV. So a lot of this information, even though they have to do the written test for DMV, they're gaining knowledge here from our program, so when they go out there, they can take that test, pass it the first time, and hopefully not have to go back the second time. The compliance issues, especially on brakes, we always stress to them, I was never so concerned about going fast as I was about getting stopped. I'm more interested in the braking ability of that truck, making sure everything's in compliance, and didn't have a problem with that.
Okay, so you're basically a front-to-back training, classroom, on the road, behind the wheel, and all of those things. What do you then, what's your experience been then after a student graduates and is looking for a job driving, what he's and applying what he's learned here at Southeast Community College? What is your direction for the student, and how, if any, you work with employers, and what's been your success?
We have job fairs here. We also have a carrier panel. The carrier panel, we instituted that about 8 years ago, and we had a lot of students that wanted to do local work. And this was in our winter quarter. The excavating companies had started moving dirt and everything, and they were evidently trying to stall the student off a little bit later on the application process. Students come back, and the carriers that they were going to, these companies were saying, well, you come back and see us when you've got a CDL in hand. And so the students come back and they told us, well, no need to go out and apply at this place and this place because they won't accept anything till you have a CDL in hand. And we finally explained to them what the process was and the background checks that need to be done by all the companies. And sometimes this is a 2-week process of processing all the paperwork. So we tried to enlighten them as to what the companies go through, what they look for on a job application. We also tried to help them make a good first impression and understand what that carrier was all about and so forth.
What then would you tell the motor carriers out there who are contemplating hiring one of your students? What would you suggest to those motor carriers just hiring a student who's just graduated out of your school to maybe further their training or something like that? What would you suggest those motor carriers do?
A lot of them, they need to have a finishing program where it goes sometimes as little as 4, sometimes as many as 8 weeks, and watch that driver and get them out in your equipment with an experienced driver. Many of your larger carriers are doing this. This is an item that on a smaller carrier is sometimes cost prohibitive. those companies, I suggest that they go ahead and watch them very closely and everything, so that they're not having some issues with safety-related items and everything, or get them thrown back into their old habits of driving the truck the way they drove their car. I always tell my students they're not driving their daddy's Oldsmobile anymore. They're driving a large vehicle, and everything changes. The dynamics for driving, for following distances and cornering and so forth, and speed needs to be adapted in. And they just can't drive fast with a truck. Sometimes slow is better, and you actually make better time in the long run.